So let's start to look at the types of usage of computer systems. In this video we're going to explore the ways in which computer systems are used and the functions that they can perform. But first, let's start to think about where we actually use computer systems. Well, there are a couple of obvious ones. First of those is at home. Most of us have some kind of device that we use in the home. Similarly, our office jobs. Our work life, whether that's actually in an office or on the road, there's usually some type of computing that we have to use as a part of our job. But computer systems really get everywhere. These days, driving a car, most of us will use some kind of satellite navigation. The in-car entertainment, the audio system is often a computer system in and of itself. And then of course you've got more modern technologies being tested these days, like self-driving vehicles. So pretty much every part of being on the road requires a computer system. And of course most of us have a mobile that is some kind of smart device. That is in essence a computer system in your hands. In fact, computer systems in various shapes and forms really come into most aspects of everyday life. Whether it's paying for goods in store, whether you're doing that with cash or card or more modern things like Apple Pay and Google Wallet, or walking through those automated doors that sense you coming and open. These are things we tend to call embedded systems. Okay, they're where the computer system is not really visible to the user. For this unit, we're going to be focusing on the more visible types. So we're going to be looking at PCs, laptops, tablets, and mobile. So there are really two types of users that we need to consider. We're going to look at those who use it for personal use. We're going to call those home users, although they may well actually be on the road, out and about with friends, as well as in their actual home. And then we need to look at those users who are using it for business or commercial or organisational aims. We're going to call these office users, although again, they may not actually be in the office. So for home users, what sorts of requirements do they have of computer systems? Well, this will often include functional requirements such as the ability to access the internet. Maybe they're going to browse the web, do some online shopping, perhaps accessing email or watching streaming entertainment or online gaming. So they'll have something they want to do with the system. They may also have requirements over the physical device itself. Maybe they need it to be mobile, or maybe actually something that fits into their office. The cost of the device is often going to be important based on their available budget. Similarly, desirability and loyalty to particular brands may come into play. And this isn't all. Things like the size of the screen that they want. Perhaps they need a larger one for ease of reading. Maybe they have particular preferences over certain types of technology. So all this will determine the sort of computer system that a home user needs. Similarly, office users will have functional requirements. This will normally be related to their actual job and the tasks they need to perform. Perhaps they need to be able to render graphical animations, or they're doing graphical design work. They may need the ability to do advanced coding and compiling. It may just be accessing the company's office systems. Perhaps they're doing some accounting or administration, or maybe they work in sales. So again, these requirements will come into play along with physical requirements, so requirements over the asset itself. Again, mobility comes in. Will they be on the road a lot? Reliability is a very common one for office users. Nobody wants to be trying to do their job with an unreliable device. And of course, for larger companies, where they may be buying hundreds or possibly even thousands of computer systems, the ability to negotiate bulk discounts can have a big impact on the choice of device. So it's important to understand the needs of the user before selecting a device so that a suitable system can be identified to address their needs. For example, if the user will be on the road, then a laptop or tablet may be the best option. If they're working in an office all the time, then a desktop workstation will usually cost a lot less for the equivalent performance. For a home user, if gaming is what they desire, then a desktop could be ideal. Unless, of course, they also want to be able to take that on the road. Maybe they want to go to gaming conventions. Then a powerful laptop, is probably more their thing. If you're just going to do some surfing and a bit of browsing around the web, play the odd video, then actually a nice cheap basic laptop will do the job. And if you're spending your time creating digital artwork, then you're going to need something more powerful with a much bigger screen so that you can see all the detail. So we need to consider the user, what they need to achieve, and what their requirements are over the device. But there is another aspect to requirements, and we'll call these performance requirements. And they're influenced quite a lot by the software that the user needs to use in order to achieve their aim. So let's have a look at some of those performance requirements. Well, one area that this covers is storage. Okay, so hard disks, SSD drives, or physical rotating disks, whether they need USB storage, whether they need to be able to back up their information to Blu-rays or DVDs. When you buy a PC, a laptop, a tablet, or even a mobile phone, you'll often see that the amount of storage is one of the figures that they quote. And this is because the amount of storage space required will vary quite widely depending on its use. So if, for example, your user is going to be browsing the web, checking some email, do a bit of online shopping, and maybe watch some Netflix, then you really only need the operating system, a web browser, and maybe an email app. So a pretty basic storage drive is all they're going to need. But what if they want to create YouTube videos? Well, then they're going to have quite a lot of raw video clips. They're going to be keeping recorded audio, perhaps have some introduction animations to their videos and pictures that they're going to embed throughout it. So they're going to need a lot more storage space. So you need to think about what the user will be using, what they'll be creating, and thus what they'll need the capacity to store. Another aspect of storage also is speed. So SSD drives, or solid state drives, are faster to pull data in to the computer and to save data onto the drive. If they need the ability to swiftly access large amounts of data, then an SSD drive may be the best way forward, but it costs a lot more than the more traditional physical rotating drive. Another part to consider is CPU and indeed GPU power. So CPU being the central processing unit, or the core processor in the machine, and GPU is the graphics processing unit, and that's normally on what we call the graphics card. So if you know that the user is going to be gaming, then they're probably going to need a fairly powerful CPU, and they're likely to need a very powerful GPU, a gaming GPU. But what if they're doing 3D CAD in the office? Well, they probably need a really powerful CPU. But instead of a gaming GPU, they may want one of the more commercial or industrial oriented graphics cards. Okay? But of course, if you're just surfing the web and watching some videos, then a far less powerful CPU will do the job. Now, given that CPUs, both for desktops and laptops, can cost anywhere from, say, £30 to over £1,000, this can make an enormous difference to the budget. Moving on from that, we also need to think about battery life. If you're using a desktop, this shouldn't be too much of a problem. You are plugged into the mains after all. But what if you're mobile? This then becomes quite an issue. How long does the device need to be able to run? Will the user just be using the device occasionally between meetings where they'll then plug it in? Or do they actually need to be able to get through a full 12-hour shift without a single recharge? There are some very power efficient devices out there that will run for many hours, but they're not usually very powerful. So you have to find the right mix between the performance of the system and its ability to run for a suitable duration. I remember how I said if you've got a desktop and it's running on mains, and that's fine. What if there's a power cut? For a home user, it's probably not a problem, and indeed for most office users it's not an issue either. But what if you're doing something critical? What if you're rendering the next big Disney movie? Okay? Or what if you're creating important data for a secure government project? Well, in that case, you might need something called a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply, so that you can safely save and secure the data whilst running on battery power for a while. Another common thing to consider with a computer system is the screen size and resolution, and indeed the screen type. These can be quite important influences over how the user experiences the system. So resolution is the number of dots or pixels that a screen has both horizontally and vertically. A lot of software has a minimum resolution that it will operate in. whereas games, on the other hand, may only run smoothly and quickly up to a certain resolution depending on the power of the graphics card. So resolution can matter, but what about size? A high resolution tablet screen may only be 10 inches, and it is indeed a thing of beauty, but would you want to work on that for 8 hours of the day? You probably want something larger with a better viewing angle, so a freestanding monitor may be better in your home office or in the workplace. And what about the technology itself? There are different types of technology that go into making screens. Some of them are very fast to respond, so the pixels can change color quickly. These are often good for gaming, so that you get very smooth video and very smooth action. They can also be good for watching video. But what if you're doing graphical work? Well, actually what you may find is more important then is the degree of color accuracy, whether the colors that the screen displays are actually representative of the intended color. After all, you wouldn't want to spend weeks designing the packaging for some new luxury product, only to find that when it's actually then created, all the colors are completely wrong. So sometimes the type of monitor technology is important. And another common facet to consider is memory. The amount of RAM that a computer has. Browsing doesn't really need very much, maybe 2 to 4 gigabytes is enough these days. But what if you're playing games? Well, you're probably going to need a bit more than that. They can take up quite a lot of space. What if you're rendering videos? Well, you might want a little bit more as well. And indeed, if you're doing CAD work, well, you probably want loads of the stuff. So again, you need to think about what the user's going to be doing. And when you look at the software that they'll be using, that will often state a minimum requirement for the amount of memory that a system must have. And this isn't all. As well as the parts that go into the machine, you also need to think about the peripherals. Does the user need a printer? Is a mouse okay, or do they need a tablet for doing their design work? What about a 3D headset? And how about accessibility, specially adapted kit that makes it easier for the user to operate the system? Do you need sound playback capabilities? Then some speakers might be a good option. What about a microphone? Maybe they need a scanner. It really all depends on what the user needs to do and how they work effectively with the computer. And of course, as mentioned, the software that they need. So let's move on. As you move through the next videos, what you'll see is some examples of what might be needed depending on the requirements of the user for their computer system. We'll look at some examples in the office and home as to what might need to go into it. So when you're ready, move on and watch the next video.